this yesterday, Ryan, about how, in the context of riots, he was saying, let's just bring the military into it to deal with American citizens. I mean, that happened yesterday.
Right, but the post-George Floyd riots resulted in an excess of over 15,000 black male deaths in this country. How?
Yeah.
The surge of violent crime, it was like Ferguson, the Ferguson effect and the Floyd effect.
Respectfully, you got to explain to me how George Floyd's death. Yeah. Because I need causation here.
Yes,
you really
because
are
what
messing me
happens
up
is
here.
after the...
All right, guys, so we got to talk about a black liberal meltdown on CNN. In fact, we got to talk about another black liberal meltdown on CNN later today because the race conversation is intensifying in the media, right? And the reason why is because the minority coalition of the Democrat Party is collapsing, okay? For whatever reason, Kamala Harris, who is supposed to appeal to so-called minorities, she's doing a terrible job at that, right? Minorities are basically saying, no, we don't want to vote based off identity politics anymore. We failed for this okie doke for the last 60, 70 years, okay? Since the Civil Rights Act of 1965, we went along with the okie doke of voting for politicians based off race, sex, racism, bigotry, all these things that Democrats love to campaign on instead of the real issues. We've been there, done that. We're tired of being tricked. We're going to go with the guy that we know has delivered good results, great results for the country and my life and my family, okay? They're thinking logically, okay? They're thinking rationally. And black liberals can't stand when black people think logically and rationally, especially when it comes to how to vote, right? And that is kind of what is leading to a lot of this conflict that is taking place on these liberal media platforms between so-called minorities that support Trump and so-called minorities that support Kamala Harris, okay, Democrats. And that leads me to this segment right here, okay, on CNN, where you're going to have some black liberals. Their heads are going to explode because they're going to hear facts, which is something that they don't hear too much on this network, especially when it comes to the topic of crime, in which liberals hate to hear the truth and the reality that crime is out of control in these liberal cities, okay? And they constantly rely on lies being told by the FBI about the crime that's actually being committed in this country, evidenced by the fact that the FBI quietly revised their 2022 crime statistics to include thousands of more murders, robberies, assaults than what was originally reported. And it actually now shows that crime increased 4.5% instead of decreasing 2.1% from 2021.
Crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud.
Yeah, so once again, we can chalk that up under Trump was right, okay? The mainstream liberal media was wrong, okay? Does anybody believe the FBI's 2023 crime statistics, right? They're going to come out in a few years and they're going to revise those statistics as well, too. And they're going to show that, in fact, crime was up. Okay, like everybody knows crime is up. I've talked to so many people, especially people from New York City, these big liberal cities that are like, yeah, crime is out of control. Crime has not been like this since the 90s. Okay, that's what they feel like, right? These people aren't lying. Okay, the FBI is lying. And they're doing so in order to protect Democrats because everybody knows that part of the reason why crime is up is because of the Democrats and their soft on crime policies. Okay. Also, another reason why crime is up is what we call the Ferguson / George Floyd effect, okay, which is what Ryan Gerdusky, who's a conservative on this CNN panel, is going to explain to these black liberals on the panel. And the black liberals, their heads are going to explode because they're ignorant, okay? They never heard about this, okay? But essentially what it says is that when you have these very, very, very viral events that happen with black people being arrested by the police, and then you have these race riots and all these other things that happen, the anti-police movement, that leads to more crime in the country. Now, this is something that the FBI back in 2015, 2016, before they went woke, right, to the point where they lie on behalf of Democrats, right, when they weren't lying on behalf of Democrats all the time in order to help Democrats, when they were, telling a little bit of truth about what's happening in this country. They acknowledge was a real thing, right? Like, this is actually a real thing that happens in the wake of racial riots and anti-police sentiments that happen in this country as a result of police brutality. Take a look.
Cities across the United States are reeling from a dramatic spike in violent crime, and some, including the FBI director James Comey, say that's because of what is being called the Ferguson effect. Comey is suggesting that increased scrutiny of police tactics in the wake of the Ferguson unrest and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement has police holding back.
I spoke to officers privately in one big city precinct who described being surrounded by young people with mobile phones held high, taunting them when they get out of their cars. They said to me, "We feel under siege and we don't feel much like getting out of our cars." And so the question that's been asked of me is, are these kinds of things changing police behavior all over the country? And is that what explains the map and the calendar? The honest answer is, I don't know. And I don't know that that explains it entirely. But I do have a strong sense that some part of the explanation is a chill wind that has blown through law enforcement over the last year. And that wind is surely changing behavior.
Our justice reporter Evan Perez is joining us now with more. Did the FBI director have a chance to clarify those remarks earlier today?
Well, Wolf, he made similar comments today at this convention, the International Association of Chiefs of Police here in Chicago. But he also said that he simply was trying to start a conversation because he is very concerned about the spike in murders and other violent crimes in some parts of the country. And he says he doesn't want to wait to see, perhaps to discuss this next year. He wants people to talk about it now.
He also spoke about the Black Lives Matter issue as well. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. What did he say?
Well, one of the things he says he's worried about, Wolf, is that people are not talking to each other. People on one side are tweeting Black Lives Matter. On the other side, police lives matter is the hashtag. And he says what he's concerned about is that people need to start talking to each other more to be able to solve some of the problems with policing and especially in the minority communities. Here's how he described the issues as he sees it.
There's the line of law enforcement and there's the line of communities we serve, especially communities of color. And I actually feel those two lines arcing apart, right, through the hashtag Black Lives Matter and the hashtag Police Lives Matter. Of course, each of those hashtags and what they represent adds in a voice to an important conversation. But each time somebody interprets hashtag Black Lives Matter as anti-law enforcement, one line moves away. And each time that someone interprets hashtag Police Lives Matter as anti-black, the other line moves away.
Just yesterday, Ryan, about how, in the context of riots, he was saying, let's just bring the military into it to deal with American citizens. I mean, that happened yesterday.
Right, but the post-George Floyd riots resulted in an excess of over 15,000 black male deaths in this country. How?
Yeah.
The surge of violent crime, it was like Ferguson, the Ferguson effect and the Floyd effect.
Respectfully, you got to explain to me how George Floyd's death.
Yeah.
Because I need causation here.
Yes,
you really are
because what
messing me
happens
up
is
here.
after the Ferguson riot and after the Floyd riot, policemen, in fear of their jobs many times and political coverage, pull back from their jobs, resulting in an increased level of
listen, I got to stop you there because hold on.
You can look at the Washington Post.
Ryan, we got to stop you there because you're literally making a connection out of your own conjecture.
No,
you cannot.
It's
just
a real
do
thing.
that.
Look up the Ferguson effect. Look up the Floyd effect. It is a real term.
You cannot.
It's a real term. I didn't make this up.
Invent a connection between two things just because you want that connection to be there.
Wow. Now, again, this is why I can't stand Abby Phillip, because she's a liberal propagandist. Now, again, she's supposed to be the moderator. You're supposed to be the journalist. You're supposed to be neutral. But clearly she's not. She wants this show to be about her and her opinion, which apparently her network doesn't agree with, right? Because her network literally covered the Ferguson effect, the George Floyd effect, which is what this man is trying to explain, but they're not letting him explain it, okay? What this man is trying to say is that because of the anti-police movement that happened as a result of George Floyd, what happened was that police officers quit. They quit en masse. They feel like they can't do their jobs. And that has led to more crime. We've covered so many stories about how police have basically become damn near useless in a lot of these liberal cities. Why is that? It's because when you call them because of a crime, doesn't matter if the crime is serious or not, they don't show up for a couple hours if they show up at all. If they do show up, they probably won't even report the crime, okay? They won't do anything about it because there's nothing they can do. And if they happen to arrest a criminal, the criminal gets let out of jail via catch and release, okay? So it's almost like it's pointless for them to be doing their jobs in the first place. Again, this has led to a spike in crime across the country that we haven't seen since the 90s, which is something these people refuse to acknowledge. And when educated on why this is happening, they want to say, oh, well, you're just making it up. You're making it up. You just made that up. And it's like, no, he didn't make that up. This is a real thing that CNN acknowledged was real just almost 10 years ago. Again, it's amazing how that works. It's amazing how that works. These people, they make me sick. They make me sick. They're so stuck in their elitist bubble that when they hear anything outside of the propaganda that they're drowning in every single day, their heads explode, right? And they say, oh, well, you must be making that up. It must not be real. And it's like, no, it's 100% real. 100% real, okay? And if you weren't living in an elitist bubble, right, you would acknowledge that, hey, yeah, this is actually a real thing, right? But the reality of what this man's saying is 100% true. Black Lives Matter, in my opinion, is more responsible for black male deaths in this country than police brutality. This is why I get so annoyed by these people wanting to spend time talking about police brutality as if it's a real issue when it's not, right? Not compared to crime, murder, right? You want to talk about saving black lives. You're going to save a lot more black lives by locking up the criminals, right? By getting tough on crime. You're going to save a whole lot more black lives, innocent black lives. But see, the whole police brutality thing is about saving black criminals, right? I'm not concerned about saving black criminals, okay? I'm just not. I'm not. But I am concerned about saving the lives of black innocent people, right? Black law-abiding citizens, black people who contribute positively to society and to their communities. I'm 100% concerned about those people. But I'm not concerned about the black criminals. I'm sorry. I'm just not. I'm not going to boo-hoo, whine, and cry over black criminals. I'm just not, okay? But the reality is that George Floyd, what happened, and the result of what happened, the race riots, BLM, all that stuff, that has emboldened criminals to commit more crimes. It has demoralized police, and all of this has been supported by the Democrat Party via the defund the police movement, local Democrat politicians, progressives that have enacted soft on crime policies, George Soros funded backed DAs who do not prosecute the criminals. And again, all of this stuff has led to the violent crime spike that we've seen in this country. That's the worst that we've had since the 90s, right? Those are the facts.
It's a little like a name. It's a real thing. You can look it up.
Right. It could be a real thing, but it doesn't mean it's accurate. Yeah.
Let's mix them up all the time because we use their point.
Look it up. I'll send you a reading list after the show.
Before we move on, I think there's
Hold on. I just want everyone to settle down because people cannot hear at home when everybody's talking at once, okay? Go ahead.
No, I just think there has to be a level of intellectual honesty. And one of the things we can talk about here when we talk about Donald Trump is he's actually somebody who never spoke out about George Floyd's death. And for me, it's kind of personal because as a black man, when you have someone with a knee on their neck for 9 minutes and some change and you're actually calling out for your mother while you're being suffocated on national TV and you are a parent and a son and a brother, that goes a long way. The kind of disingenuity or dishonesty for me is you cannot say that what happened during that time period is to blame for the deaths of other black men due to violence or what have you.
100% happened.
But that literally, and my point to you is that makes absolutely no sense. And I would argue to you as somebody that I'm not coming from a perspective where I want fewer police. I don't. I want police actually to be paid more. I just want better police, more qualified police. I want there to be a database where police, if they commit bad acts, they can't just go from one department to another. That's criminal justice reform.
Okay.
But George Floyd didn't cause 15,000.
And here, before you jump in, I mean, we should know that you're talking about things that happened when Donald Trump was president.
Right.
He was the president. So how is he not responsible for it?
Well, the president doesn't control local police departments.
Well, okay, but you're trying to blame crime on Joe Biden.
No, I
but
didn't
you don't blame.
I didn't blame
Republicans
crime
have blamed
on Joe Biden.
crime on Joe Biden, but you cannot. But you're saying that that people who died when Donald Trump was president, that's not his fault?
I don't
agree with either blame being assigned to either president. I think presidents don't have a magic wand and they don't control crime from the White House.
Right.
But if you're going to say that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are responsible for a rise in crime,
I didn't say that, though.
Don't you have to be intellectually?
All I will say is like,
well, I mean, listen, here's the thing. The intellectual dishonesty here is pretending as if Democrats and their rhetoric is not connected to a spike in crime. Again, the intellectual dishonesty is to pretend as if the George Floyd riots did not usher in a crime wave in this country that, again, we haven't seen since the 90s. That's the intellectual dishonesty. So, yeah, no, I'm not blaming Trump. Or, yeah, you shouldn't blame Trump for what happened during the BLM protest, okay? But you should blame Democrats because Democrats supported it, okay? So, yeah, I actually can blame Democrats. I can blame Joe Biden. I can blame Kamala Harris because they supported the riots. They encouraged the riots. They supported defunding the police. And the trickle-down effect of that is what led to the spike in crime, okay? In fact, Democrats acknowledge this because after the 2020 election, when there wasn't a blue wave, it was predicted by the polls that there was supposed to be a blue wave, okay? Democrats were supposed to overwhelmingly win the House, the Senate, and the presidency, but that didn't happen, okay? They barely won the Senate, and we all know what happened with the presidency. But anyways, they didn't get the results that they were expecting. And one of the things that they said was part of the reason why is because of their support for defund the police. And the support for defund the police has demoralized police. It has caused police to quit en masse. They don't feel comfortable doing their job, mainly white males, because they saw the consequences firsthand of what happens when you do your job and somebody dies as a result of you doing your job, right? You get called racist, you lose your livelihood, you can't feed your family, you get thrown in jail, and you might get stabbed to death, right? I mean, no police officer wants to go through that. They said, you know what, I don't want to take the risk, and they quit, right? And again, we this is stuff we talked about time and time again. So when you talk about intellectual dishonesty, to pretend that this is not a real thing or that this didn't happen, it just shows that you're ignorant or you're just a reality denier, right? Which is probably both, okay? Because these are the same people that deny the reality that crime is up in the first place. So, of course, they wouldn't understand the connection between defund the police, George Floyd, the race riots, and the crime spike because they don't even acknowledge that there's a problem with crime.
we're talking about what the future is for Black Americans. And what I will say is that Kamala Harris supports the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which, again, I have no idea what you're talking about in terms of connection. I will read it. Okay. And then I will fact check the sources that actually wrote the thing. But that's what we're talking about for a plan for Black America, is how we make public safety something so that everyone, Black, white, brown, can live in safe communities. That's not what Donald Trump wants. Donald Trump, again, doesn't want a better border, because if he could have had a better border under this president by supporting a bill, and he didn't want to do it.
That's not true at all. That's
all right, guys, we do have to pause there. There's actually a lot more to talk about. We'll continue this conversation and many others coming up next.
Yeah, so here we have more reality denialism from Democrats, right? From Black liberals, okay? They don't want to admit that crime is actually an issue. They don't want to admit that George Floyd, the race riots, BLM is part of the reason why it happened, okay? And Democrat Party rhetoric, they don't want to admit any of these things, okay? They rather just deny reality and then tell you, people who are living in reality, that, hey, you're a conspiracy theorist. But the reality is, whether or not liberals like to hear this or not, the George Floyd incident, the riots, along with the pandemic, was one of the worst things to ever happen to this country, and it's mainly because Democrats supported it, okay? They basically discouraged Trump from doing what he really wanted to do, which is to send in the military, send in the National Guard to take care of these riots, which should have happened, okay, at the time, right? We should not have had all this stuff happening in this country, but it did, and it led to the spike in violent crime that we've seen for the last 3 or 4 years that liberals refuse to acknowledge. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.